All right, everybody. It is 3:30, which of course means it is time for one of our daily Headwaters Science Center live STEM shows. I'm Ryan, one of the educators here at the Headwaters Science Center in Bemidji, Minnesota. And for those of you who have been watching us for a little while here, you might remember kind of part one of this. So today what I'm going to be doing is finishing a mount for a spider that I started last week. And before we really get started, just a couple kind of logistics notes here. I'm wearing a mask right now. We are still very much in the midst of COVID. So generally when I'm around at the Science Center, I do still choose to wear a mask. But for the sake of the stream here, and because I am vaccinated, I'm actually going to be lowering my mask for the sake of clarity for you folks. And just a couple other kind of housekeeping logistics things. Shout out to the Beltrami Electric Co-op for underwriting these with their Roundup program. So the way that works is members of the Beltrami Electric Co-op can choose to round up their monthly bill up to the nearest dollar, and that they use that extra money that they make from that to fund mostly nonprofits, but kind of community outreachy type of programs, and we're a beneficiary of that. So big thanks to them. Also, because we are talking a little bit about some of our critters today, I would also like to give a shout out to Harmony Co-op in downtown Bemidji. They provide us with a lot of the food that we feed to our animals, so big thanks to both of those two groups for helping us out here at the Headwaters Science Center. And so, I think we'll do a little review first. We'll talk a little bit about the spider that made this shed and kind of tarantulas in general. I guess also of note is we are open here today, so you'll probably hear some folks in the background, hear a little bit of noise coming in off the exhibit floor. Hopefully it's not too much for you guys. If it's going to be a real problem, let me know, and I can do probably a little futzing with the microphone to fix that. But I think just to start, I'll show you kind of what we're starting with today. And so, like I said, this is a shed skin or a molt from our Chilean rosehair tarantula. And our Chilean rosehair tarantula I actually have up here with me right now. I'll show you her in a little bit here. But she is a little bit older spider. We don't even necessarily know exactly how old she is, but we've had her with us here for several years. And I can tell you that she is a little bit older spider because I've worked here for over 3 years at this point, and this is the first time she has shed since I've been here. And for an adult spider, for a fully mature spider, that's very normal. But if she were to be a juvenile spider, she'd be shedding a lot more often because she would still be growing relatively quickly. And spiders never like completely stop growing, but it slows down pretty dramatically after their first few years. Basically, once they hit 10 or so is for most species of tarantula when the growth rate really slows down. And they, like I said, drop from shedding probably a few times a year all the way down to shedding. Like I said, it's been at least 3 years since the last time this spider shed, which, like I said, for an adult spider is not super unheard of, out of the ordinary. A couple things that I think are kind of cool that I could maybe draw some attention to for you here. So this kind of side piece here is actually the back of the spider. So lighting's a little wonky here, but if you can maybe see, the back on the spider is actually it's open. And so that's because the back is the way that the spider leaves the shed. And so this part here is the back of the cephalothorax, which is kind of the foremost body segment of a spider. And then the back part here is the back of the abdomen, which is the part that has like the spinnerets in it. It's where the web comes from. And so basically the cephalothorax part kind of pops off. It's a little harder, it's a little more rigid, and then the abdomen part kind of peels back from there. And then when it actually comes time to leave the shed itself, usually they'll flip over onto their back and kind of leave that way. And so this shed happened maybe 3 weeks ago or so now. And like I said, just last week, I went and I first soaked it for a while, because you can mount stuff like this, but generally if you don't get it right away and start mounting it, it's going to start stiffening up and it's going to get very fragile very quickly. And so what I had to do before I could actually mount this was I put it in a little plastic baggie with some wet paper towels so it could soak and get a little bit more loosened up before I actually started pinning it. And then I got this block of foam and I put these pins through it to kind of pin it down in place, and it's been sitting on this block of foam now for about a week. So it's probably pretty rigid right now, and so I'm going to have to be very careful as I'm doing this, because what I'm going to be doing is removing all of these pins, lifting the spider out, and then I'm going to be putting it in a clear plastic container so that we can actually use this out on the exhibit floor as an educational tool here at the museum. And so as an example of something of kind of what I'm going to be doing is something like this, basically, where this is from a different spider. This is unfortunately one that's no longer with us. She passed away some years ago. You can see it's just in a kind of hard plastic thing here, so if a guest gets a little overzealous and tries to reach in and grab at it, we don't have to worry about it getting too broken up. And again, I like the clear plastic because it's a way I can show what's underneath it here. Let's see if I can change my lighting situation a little bit, maybe make it a little easier for y'all. The other thing that's kind of interesting with these sheds is you can actually see the fangs that are on it still. And so a lot of people would assume that the fangs are teeth, but arthropods, including spiders, don't actually have like teeth the same way we do. So what they have actually are just part of their exoskeleton that is kind of shaped like that. So it's made out of the same stuff that the rest of their exoskeleton is made of. It's this material called chitin that is functionally very similar to what we have in our body. That is called keratin, so kind of similar to the stuff that like our fingernails are made out of. But their whole exoskeleton is made of that. And so when they shed, they actually slough a layer off of their fangs too, and so the fangs get preserved, but she wasn't like without fangs after her shed. She didn't have to like regrow whole new fangs. She still had more or less fully functioning fangs afterwards. And I say more or less because there is a little bit of a period after they shed where their bodies are much softer, much more pliable, flexible. The thing I kind of liken it to a lot of times when I'm talking about it out on the exhibit floor is kind of almost like a pile of wet spaghetti noodles when they come out. It's not quite that bad. They're not quite that floppy, but they're not nearly as mobile as they usually are, because you think about it, like the part that they shed off is their skeleton, and skeletons kind of in the broadest definition are like the hard parts of your body that your muscles use to have leverage when they are moving you. And so in the absence of that, you don't really have the ability to like move because there's nothing hard for your muscles to be leveraging against. And so the time when they're shedding is actually a really, really vulnerable time for not just spiders, but like all arthropods, because they're functionally without a skeleton for a little while. And if you come and visit the Science Center, you'll see we have a couple other arthropods that go through a similar shedding process. So like the cockroaches that we have here is probably the one you'll see the most often going through sheds, just because we have a lot of them. And so you can look in there at any given time. There's probably one that shed relatively recently. And I can tell you from like having picked those up, they're like noticeably much softer. And that's true for the spiders as well. And I think just for the sake of showing her here, because I did bring her up to kind of watch this process, is we do have our Chilean rose-haired tarantula, and she's probably not going to get a great look at her because she's hiding kind of inside of her little hidey hole there. Oh, she's right in there. So she's doing fine. Like I said, it's a stressful process for them to shed, but it's something that is a normal part of their life cycle. And so, assuming nothing out of the ordinary happens, they should come out of it perfectly fine. And so I think with no further ado, because my hot glue gun is starting to drip over here, I think I'm going to get started. So I'm going to be taking my camera and I'm just going to be tilting it downwards here. I'm going to bring my big light back. And for most of the rest of this, you're probably just going to be hearing my voice and seeing my hands. So I'm going to bring this forward, drop you down, tighten that. And so this is our container that we're going to be putting her in. You can see it's a pretty significantly smaller container than what our other spider is in, because the spider we're working with is quite a bit smaller than the striped knee was. Like I said, she is a Chilean rose-hair tarantula, which is a South American species of tarantula, actually very popular in the pet trade. Probably the most popular pet tarantula out there, actually, because they're kind of known for being relatively docile. They don't get super, super big. Just readily kind of available. If you're gonna go to a pet store and buy a tarantula, the rose hairs are probably the most accessible one out there. So, and we actually have two tarantulas that live here at the Science Center right now. We have this rose hair one that we're talking about today, and we have a golden knee tarantula as well, which is another quite popular pet species of tarantula. And like I said, both of ours are South American species of tarantula. There's tarantulas in Africa too. They tend to be less popular in the pet trade. They're kind of, as a collective, known for being a little bit more ornery, a little bit more, or I guess a little bit less handleable, which discourages people away from them. One of the things that I do like about the African tarantulas, though, is that they don't have what are called the articulating hairs on them. And so the articulating hairs, you can see, and all tarantulas have like a fuzz to them, which is, I guess, softer than you might expect. You know, people ask a lot of times how they feel, and you know, they are genuinely like kind of fuzzy, which you wouldn't expect. Their hair is not made of the same stuff our hairs are. Their hair is made of chitin, just like the rest of their exoskeleton. And be very careful here because I don't want to snap off these last two that I'm pulling out are attached to not legs, but they're called pedipalps. So you can see, actually, if we count, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all 8 legs that a spider has, but you can see she actually has these last two things kind of in the front that, like I said, are called pedipalps. And they are not actually legs, but actually kind of part of their mouth parts is what they actually are, but they use them kind of like hands. These last two out of the abdomen back here. Alright, so that's the main body of our spider free. But going back to those articulating hairs, they usually specifically refer to the hairs on the bottom or the belly of the spider, which maybe I can get here. And so one of the things you'll see them do when they get really stressed out, when they think they're threatened, is you'll see them using those pedipalps, and they'll start rubbing their belly with them. They'll kind of rear up and they'll start using those pedipalps and rubbing their bellies. And what they're trying to do is fling hairs at you. And when those hairs stick in you, they are almost like little needles. It feels a lot like if you ever mess around with like the insulation in the walls of your house, that like pink stuff, the fiberglass. It feels a lot like that, so it's kind of irritating to your skin when they get stuck in you. And so most of the South American tarantulas do that. All of them that I know of, but I always hesitate to say all of them because a lot of times there'll be some goofy exception. But as far as I know, all of the South American tarantulas do that, and none of the African ones do. But like I said, the South American ones still end up being generally more popular in the pet trade because probably just more easily accessible, but also, as far as I've ever heard, the demeanor of them tends to be a little easier to work with, a little bit more handleable. Another thing that's kind of cool that we can get a good look at here now when I have it kind of loose are these two things in the back here coming off the back of the abdomen. And these are called the spinnerets. And so these are the things that she would use to make a web. And so the web comes out the back of the thorax, and then these two things are able to move, and they can move independently. And so what she'll use is those to kind of pull the webbing out when she is making her web. And she doesn't make a web like a lot of kind of spiders you'd be used to make. She actually makes kind of a big carpet when she's making her web. Just going to set her to the side here. And then I'm going to start, get my tray out of the way, by just kind of making a big kind of glob of glue right in the middle here. And this is going to be where the main part of her body is attached. We want to get the center of the body on there too. Oops. And it's kind of the trickiest part. Around there. So once it's down, I don't have a whole lot of means of moving it because it's very, very fragile. So you'd be shocked at how light it is. And this is true for like the full body of the tarantula too, is that they're a lot lighter than a lot of people would expect them to be. But the shed skin, you like almost can't feel it at all. So you might even be able to see like this thing as I've been moving it around. It's like a dry, dead leaf. Like I have to like make an effort to not have it just like blow away on me just from like the cross breezes that exist within the museum here. So it's pretty good, kind of right in the middle, right where I wanted it. And now what I'm going to be doing is, where's my stick? Give me 1 second, I got to grab another glue stick. I was chatting to you guys too long and my glue gun leaked most of its glue out. Common problem I've got. My shows always go long. But hey, I like chatting with you guys. And so now what I'm going to be doing is going to the ends of each of the legs and the pedipalps, and I'm just going to be putting a little dab of glue on the ends of each. The dream scenario would be if I, actually went through and did something like tracing the whole spider and I could put the glue down first. But that takes a lot longer, it's a much more precise operation. So to save myself some time and headaches, what I'm just going to be doing is kind of just soaking the ends of most of the legs in glue. And so we're going to lose a little bit of visibility on the ends of the feet, but we're going to get a lot of security out of it as far as the spider not moving around. And as I mentioned, I do want this to go actually out onto the exhibit floor. So any amount of extra security for the specimen I can muster, I'm always about. Because guests can be kind of hard on our specimens sometimes. One of the rules I always say here is, we don't put anything out on the exhibit floor that we're not prepared to have break. Trying to soak too much of it in glue. There. Got a string of glue here. It's almost like a spider's web, almost like a spinneret. So, and once I'm done with the gluing all the feet down, I'll put the back part in too. Hot glue, what can you do? I don't think I'm gonna glue down every single foot, but I'll glue down, I'll get, I guess, 3 on either side here. I'll leave the second leg undone just because it's pretty close up to that first leg with all of them. I think I'll skip the pedipalps as well. I don't know how much benefit I'd be getting out of that. Yeah, it's 2 feet. But the spiders, like I said, we have 2 of them here. We have had more in the past. And our spiders used to come out. We used to do handling with spiders here. I guess it's not completely out of the question that we might try and do it again. Spiders tend to be pretty tricky as a handle, though. Even more so than things like snakes and lizards and all that. Because even though like tarantula venom isn't particularly dangerous to most people, it is something that you can be allergic to. And so if you are allergic to tarantulas, a tarantula bite is very dangerous. It's like people who are allergic to bee stings. You'll go into an anaphylactic shock with it. And the big difference between, I guess, a tarantula and bee sting, at least in Minnesota where we are, is most people around here don't know that if they're allergic to tarantulas or not, whereas people who are allergic to bee stings tend to know about it. And so it's really rare for it to, be really genuinely dangerous. But for the people it is dangerous for, it is really, really dangerous. The other kind of tricky thing with them is they're a thing that a lot of people have kind of an inherent fear of. A lot of people are afraid of afraid of spiders. And one of the things I found is that oftentimes with those animals that people tend to be a little bit more spooked of, there's a tendency to like come into it brave, and then as soon as you get that like first like foot on hand, you know, this thing happens where they get startled by the contact and pull away. And that type of thing is something that is challenging as an interpreter to kind of accommodate for, and anything that's challenging for the interpreter to accommodate for is dangerous for the animal. And so part of it is for their own safety, because they said are probably a little bit more at risk of getting dropped than most critters are, and frankly they're not very good at sustaining falls compared to a lot of critters. You know, some animals you can drop them, and you know, you don't want a drop to happen, but if it happens, they're not gonna be in too big of an issue with it. But spiders are not one of those things, I will say. So combined of like probably very likely to get dropped, but also less equipped to handle a drop than a lot of other animals would be, is not a good mix, not a great situation to be in. And especially with as much contact as we do here at the Science Center. Sorry guys, my glue gun's a little goofy here. Had an old glue stick that was in it that was like not running through properly, so I'm trying to fish the old stick out so I can put my new one in, while trying not to burn myself because it's still on. Here, I'll let you guys watch. Maybe I can. I don't think my scissors can handle this. Well, I guess while I'm fiddling with this, another thing we can take a look at, I mentioned that tarantulas do make webs, even if they are a little different than what a lot of spiders' webs are. So they have ground webs, which is not super uncommon, I guess, in the spider world, especially with tarantulas. A lot of them do that. But basically the way it works is they spin a web on the floor of their tank, and then they sit and hide. So like I said, ours is, the rose hair right now is hiding under, it's like a piece of an old like broken piece of pottery that we have in there, is her hide in there. And then basically when food, a potential prey item, walks on the web, they can feel it, and then they'll run out and basically just use their size and kind of in conjunction with their venom to grab it and bite it, and you know, they mostly let the venom do the work. Which is true for a lot of animals that are venomous. Usually it's I think I'm actually just gonna plug in a new glue gun, so that might be delayed a moment here. Perils of using equipment that also gets used by like our science clubs. Tends to be a little bit of a tendency for stuff to be a little gooped up, a little broken, not quite right. But hey, very much a worthwhile venture anyway. But like I said, you can see here there's this kind of this sort of white tinge to the ground here, and this is just a part of substrate from one of the spider tanks. I don't know whose this was originally. You can see there's this kind of white tinge to it, and that's the webbing that's been sort of just mixed in with the substrate. Like I said, so what would happen is, in the case here, what we feed ours is crickets, and so we drop a cricket in the tank, and basically they sense where it's at, they run after it, and they grab it. And you can see, maybe we can scooch the tarantula's tank in here. You can kind of see the setup she's got. 1 second. Yeah, I'll take the lid off of her tank here too, so we can actually get a good unobstructed view down in there. Raise you guys up just a smidge. Doing my own camera work today. Can't quite fully see in there all that great, but you can see, if you're, you can see all the webbing here that is just kind of along on the bottom, and there's more underneath this hunk of wood here is where kind of the lion's share of it is. And she right now is hiding inside this thing. Got her water dish here too. And so, like I said, we will toss a cricket in there for her, and the cricket runs around in here, and as it's stepping on the web here, she can feel that. And for her, it usually happens at night. She's not the most aggressive hunter, especially during the day. But when she finds the cricket, she runs out, grabs it, snatches it, and gobbles it up. And their mouth is located kind of on the underside of them. So, let's see. Does that help the glare at all? Not really. You can see where the fangs kind of come together. So, right here is also about where the mouth is, the opening for the mouth. So, kind of on the underside. Light up, adjust. You can see actually she's got this kind of pile over here is a dead cricket that's in the corner, so should probably claim that sooner or later. And we just cleaned this tank out not super long ago. It's been a few weeks at this point, but it's something we don't do very often because both of our spiders really hate it when we do clean out the tanks. Specifically because part of cleaning the tank out generally is like destroying the web. And so they have to remake their whole web every time we clean the tank. So it's something I try not to do very often. I try and really do it a minimal amount. So it's like maybe a couple time a year thing is all I ever really do cleaning with the Tarantula tanks. And so basically the thing that'll eventually prompt me to do a cleaning is if I start noticing a little bit of mold in the substrate. Because we do miss their tanks every once in a while. They generally like a pretty dry environment, but with most things they want some level of gradient of moisture within their tank. So with her, like the area that has her water dish in it will mist over there. And so eventually what we will get is mold that starts growing over there, and that's generally the thing that, like I said, is going to prompt a cleaning of the tank is when I start noticing mold around the water dish. But all that chattering I was doing made it so that our hot glue gun is seemingly ready to go again. I've just got a couple more spots left that I want to hit. What's over there? That leg. Oh yeah. That's the type of flow I like to see. It's honestly more glue than I wanted to put down, but at least it's coming out fast now rather than having to really squeeze it to get anything. And then I think the last, at least on the main body, I'm going to do is I'm going to put one right by the back on the spinnerets here, kind of across the top of both of them. And that hopefully they'll still be visible from underneath, even if they're a little globbed over from the top. And then the real last thing is I want to put that back cap in there as well. And so I was waiting on that because I wanted to see where I was going to have room for it. Because it is like the most fragile part, so I try and handle it as little as I can. And I think what I'm going to do is I guess I'll try and I think I'll try and slip it in right here. That seems like about the biggest gap I've got anywhere. We'll try that. So I'm going to do it kind of like I did the body. And I'm going to put glue down first and then try and drop it in there on top of it before it cools down. And hopefully also not break it. It's so light it's getting caught on the strands of old glue. So in the back part, the abdomen part's not quite as fragile as the cephalothorax part. It's not perfect. One of the kind of interesting features of this piece is that you can actually see where the eye holes are on it. And so I've kind of got it stuffed in such a way where the eye holes are actually underneath here. We should still be able to see it from the bottom, hopefully, but would have liked to have maybe scooched this back a fraction of an inch there so that the eyes are a little more visible from the top. But say you only get one shot, and if I looked at this at the end and said, "Yep, that's what you're gonna get," I would have taken it. So I think we're gonna be okay with that. Last step, I could not find a cap for this thing, so I think what I'm gonna do now that I have it all taped, now that I have it all glued down, what I'm gonna do is just use some packing tape to put over the top of it, some clear packing tape. Something that'll, again, keep fingers from touching it directly, but still be visible as a teaching tool. And it might not be the prettiest thing, but that's okay. Something we're making in-house, something that I'm getting some nice web content out of. The tricky part about it is it's hard to get like a professionally made like tarantula mounting kit. There's bug mounting kits. It seems like a lot of it's kind of directed towards like moths and butterflies and things like that. Tends to be the stuff that is more popular as like an insect mounting thing. And a lot of it is oriented towards mounting whole insects rather than just to shed skin. So you're working with stuff that's a little bit not quite as fragile as what we're working with here. So a lot of them are just kind of designed in such a way where it's basically like, yeah, here's a big block of foam that has a sheet of glass over it, and you just pin stuff down, and it just is how you do it. But for something like this, so we want a little bit wanted to be able to pick up and use it, because like I said, it's going to be something that we have out on the floor in the museum. And so having a sheet of glass on there is not ideal either. And so what I am using is this plastic tub is actually something that I took from our gift shop here. So shout outs to the Headwaters Science Center gift shop. If you ever come through, stop and buy something at the store, we'd appreciate it. We actually just got a bunch of new inventory in today. Well, yesterday, I guess, and a lot of it's out on the actual sales floor for the first time today. So yeah, if you haven't been through for a while, store is finally restocked. We didn't buy new stuff for the store for a long time because of COVID, and we're finally coming through the end of that a little bit, which I'm happy to see. But I think we're gonna call that mount done. And because I used hot glue, it's probably already pretty much ready to just go down onto the floor. I'll probably make a label for it. Put something probably closer to across the top that just says, rose hair tarantula, something like that. But otherwise, this is basically ready to go, just like that one is. So I guess with no further ado, sorry. I think we'll call that a wrap here. So thank you all for watching. Tomorrow, what do we got tomorrow? Oh, tomorrow's Saturday. It's a snake feeding day. So tomorrow is either going to be me or it might be Ridley, one of our kind of newer staff members here, are going to be doing our bi-weekly. It's bi-weekly every other week. Every other Saturday, we do the snake feeding. And so if you're interested in that, like I said, I'll be, at the very least, probably behind the camera, if not in front of it, to do that. So we're going to be feeding all 5 of our snakes. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you swing by tomorrow at the same time, 3:30 Central Time. I Again, shout outs to the Beltrami Electric Co-op and the Harmony Grocery Co-op, both in Bemidji, Minnesota, for their support of us here. And I guess reminder on the hours too, because we changed that not too long ago. It's been maybe a month and a half, a little more than that probably by now. But we're back to being open 7 days a week here at the Headwaters Science Center, so you can come by and visit us in person 7 days a week. Monday through Saturday, we are open 9:30 to 5. Sundays are open 1 to 5, so come by after lunch on Sundays. And if you come by at 3:30, we'll probably be shooting one of these shows. And this isn't one that I necessarily would have had guests participating in, but it's not uncommon where we'll be doing, something that's a little bit more active, maybe is a little more conducive to having an audience to it. And so a lot of times if you come by around 3:30, it's a time when we'll have something special going on that'll maybe be a little something extra you'll get for a price of admission for coming in. But say once again, thank you for watching today. Hopefully you keep coming back. You can follow us on facebook.com/HeadwatersScienceCTR, twitch.tv/Headwaters Science Center, or youtube.com/Headwaters Science Center. We simultaneously stream on all three of those. So check out any one of them. But